going, and I will just kind of kick things off. So I am Jason Baum. I am our senior director of oh, look at that, the head of community and DevRel for Sauce
It
Labs.
is. We have
That's
to update that.
yeah, that's oh, why not? I have been here at Sauce for 3 years. I'm also on the Selenium Project Leadership Committee. And with us today, leading the talk is Diego Molina. He is a developer advocate at Sauce Labs and a Selenium tech lead. I'll let you keep talking. Maybe you could talk more about yourself, Diego.
No, that's enough. I could
That's
also say
enough.
that I'm the head of community and DevRel for Europe. Um,
That's true.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, that's good. Yeah, I've been doing open source for quite a while. I've been working in testing for around 10 years. Basically, shortly after I ended my master's here in Europe, I jumped into testing right away. Because it was fun to still do coding, but I didn't have to be on call. So that was one of the perks of being in testing when I joined. The industry. So should we get started, or did you want to say?
Yeah, we usually take care of a few things up front. We do these twice a month for you. If this is your first time joining, welcome. This is an open office hours and ask me anything. We do a quick presentation up front, about 15, 20 minutes, and then we will get to your questions. And you could ask anything. You can ask on the talk that Diego's about to give, or you can bring us any other questions that you might have, and we'll do our best to answer them. And if we cannot, we will find the answers for you. These are fun. We could put you on stage, meaning that you can talk to us and ask your question, or you could just type it in the Q&A or in the chat, and you could do that at any point. So please go ahead and use those things. Like I said, we do these twice a month. So the second one is coming up on let me get the right date for you, on May 22nd, and that will be with Titus Fortner, who will be covering flaky tests. So look for that registration to open soon for that one. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Diego.
All right. Yeah. One extra thing I wanted to mention is that this part is recorded. Like at the end of the session, there will be chance for you like to come on, like let's say on stage and unmute yourself and ask your question. That part is not recorded, so only like the content part. So if you want to share this with someone, you will get the link later and you can share this content with someone else. Right, so today we want to focus on visual testing, but if you have questions about something else at the end of the session, we can get to them. So let's get started. Um, one of the things I like about visual testing is that it helps us cover things that we usually are not able to cover when we just script tests. So it has been common that every now and then we find layout or styling issues, like our users find them. And I remember I used to work in the biggest e-commerce in Germany, um, and every time there was an anniversary, the color of the page was changing. So, for example, when the company was getting like 5, 6 years and so on, the traditional color of the company and the layout is like black and orange. But when there was an anniversary or there was a special event, they were changing the color to gold, to a golden color. And since the architecture of the website is based on micro frontends, so each team was owning a different part of the frontend, one team actually forgot to make the changes to make it look golden. And then everything was looking with the gold, like a shiny yellow color, except as a part of it. So there was no visual testing back then at that moment, but having something like that would have helped because um, those bugs are silent regressions. You have your functional test, it works well uh, because the buttons are there, you can still fill out the information, but when something fails, then basically you don't know if the page is still looking properly or not. Um, the idea is that what we can see uh, with our eye, it's more than, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but we can see just like many, many things. And our scripts can only see what we tell them with instructions. Because one of the idea that we want to enhance when talking about visual testing is that um, many people think that people are just using one single browser or a couple of operating systems in mobile devices, but there is a wide range of users depending on the geographical point where we are based. So some others use more like Firefox or Safari, depending on wherever you are. And it's not really true that everyone is using the same operating system. So it's not so common to see anymore visual differences between uh, browsers, but it's more common to see visual differences when you use the same browser on different operating systems. So if you use Chrome on Mac and you use Chrome on Windows, the way buttons or the way text fields are rendered, it's different because most of the time, depending on how the web application is being built, um, that's how the element will be rendered. And this is also special in mobile devices because with accessibility as an important topic for this 2025, many people, as we get older, like you change the font on your phone and you make it a bit bigger. And not always applications are able to render their content in a proper way. So we want to have this visual consistency across every single device we access the application. Um, just to come clear, like if you are not aware of how visual testing works, let's imagine this basic website that we have as a demo at SourceLab. So this is our catalog page, and let's say we make a change and we deploy again. So if you are paying attention, then you will clearly see that some changes happened. Like there is like a different location for a few bits, and if we have something like it's actually checking the visual representation of this page that we can compare it with the baseline, and now this change, we would be able to see several changes, right? So this is the gist of how visual testing work. You have a baseline that gives you the expectation of how the page should look like. You have changes that you can take a screenshot on, and then you compare those two, and a visual testing tool can give you whatever is being shown as a difference. In this case, we have a different image. We have text elements that are being justified differently, not to the left, but not to the right. And in some other cases, for example, the icon of the shopping cart is has been moved. So yeah, like different places that even though if you're having a, a test that is written like very detailed way, you still will have a working application, but now the application is looking differently. So if you think about it, it's still possible to make sure that each element is placed in a correct way just with code. But this will lead us to the place where we will have a bunch. I'm just gonna pay attention to the questions as well. Okay. Um, I guess we should answer them at the end. Just continuing with this, so you can write a bunch of code and you can make sure that every single element is placed on the location you want. But then this means that you will have more code to maintain. Um, and the critical thing is that nowadays with artificial intelligence, we're looking for ways to simplify things, to make things more clear, more understandable. And the more code we have to maintain, the harder it is to move forward when we want to make changes. And visual testing is a way that can help us to simplify this way of changes. You can still test your user flows that are very critical. But instead of being very verbose about every single assertion regarding presence, if something is displayed, if something is located on the appropriate location, then you can just drive your test to the proper flow, and then you can do a visual check. That's why visual testing, the way we see it, and I personally see it as well, it's pretty important because it gives you a way to be confident on your digital experience. And it helps you ensure that your apps are being presented as you expect that your user will see them. Um, and going back to the point of talking about all these assertions in code, they tend to make your code more prone to brittle and sometimes to flakiness, which Titus will cover in the next session. But if you are doing just a few, it means you're not doing the proper checking. So that's why visual testing comes in place, because you don't need to write a bunch of assertions. You can reduce the amount of code you're writing, and then if you add this visual check, then you are going to be in a sweet spot. I think it's quite interesting to hear about this, but I think it's even more interesting to see a quick demo about it. I'm going to jump here to the different examples we have at Sauce for tests, and I'm going to use a couple of projects. I'm going to use one that is for Playwright, and we have a few simple tests that are checking with the Sauce demo website. So I'm gonna run them, and then we're gonna go through the tests. Let me go here. Zoom gets in the middle. So let me check here again. So this code that you're seeing here might be too small. I'm gonna make it slightly bigger. Here it is. This code is all public, so don't worry about like understanding every single thing that is shown there in the code, because this is all public, and you can also follow the README instructions that you find in each of these repositories if you want to try this. The example we have here set up for you, they first create a baseline, and then after that, we run them again with a visual difference so we can perceive how the application works. So in this case, we're going to set up something different. We're going to name the whole thing. You're going to see it in a moment. Source visual office hours. So this will be the back where all the checks will be placed into our UI, and then we can see it in a moment. So let's run this. What we're doing here, we're running the Playwright tests locally on my machine, but we're taking screenshots and then sending them to Sauce to do the comparison. In the next example, where I will use Web.io, I will run everything in the Sauce cloud. So this means the actual test and the visual comparisons will happen in the cloud. So you can see that it's possible to do both things at the same time. So let me now jump to the Sauce UI. This is where we have the automated tests. As you can see, there is nothing running because I'm running those tests locally. But if I go to the visual testing part, we're going to see here the baseline that is called visual office hours. And I don't have any changes because I was using this name before. But luckily, I was running this earlier today here. Here, for example, I was running these tests. I have the filter right. So when we take the screenshots the first time, we're going to see different combinations. In this case, I was running a test, and I was running them in different browsers. So for example, I was running them in macOS, on Firefox, on Chrome, and then on WebKit as well. So that's why we have from one single test, we have 3 different screenshots. And the same story for the other one. So what I did here was actually to accept them and say, yeah, this is my baseline. This is what I will use to compare the future screenshots in the next executions I will have for my test. So let's go back for a moment. Let's go to this source visual build, which was, I think, this one is the example I have to compare. And for example, here we have the screenshot that was executed locally with Playwright, and we can see all the difference we were seeing a moment ago in the slide deck. And we can see this is the baseline on the left, and on the right, we have the new screenshot with the changes. And for example, we can see all the things highlighted, and we can get a bunch of information that is pretty important. But basically, the workflow is that you run your test, you have differences, and then together as a team, someone will review the changes. Probably that will be like the front-end developer, or that could be someone from the UX team, and they would go here and they would say, yeah, this change makes sense, I will accept it. Now I have a new difference to validate as well, because this one was being executed on a different browser. This one was executed on, let me check again, on WebKit. And then I accept it again. And then, for example, this one was executed on Firefox as well. So I accept it. I'm just gonna go back here, and that's basically the workflow that you have to go through the execution of tests when you're doing visual testing. If you can also have a look on top, maybe you are aware that all these changes were making sense for you, and then you can go up here and you can just say, accept all of them. So let's do that for the sake of time. And when we go back to the builds, then we will see that here it is, it was accepted. So now you have a new baseline. You've made sure that all your changes are working and that you can move forward. So that's a way to use Source Visual with Playwright, running your test locally, and executing the visual comparison in the cloud. Of course, you can run everything together. If you use SauceETL, you pack your tests there and you do the visual comparison in our cloud. Let's run something different. Let's try out for we can do something like I was running shortly a moment ago the tests for mobile as well. So we support obviously web and mobile. And here I have the tests that I was running a moment ago here on SOS. So the command is similar. I'm going to use the Sauce Labs demo app that we have for iOS. And I have already uploaded that. I have already set all the configuration files. And then I run the test. And what will happen here is that a simple test will run with the application. I'm going to jump to the UI that we have at Sauce Labs. I can see in a moment that we have a test that will run on the demo app for iOS that we have at Sauce Labs, and we will use a real device. We're waiting for a moment to actually queue the test, but while we wait for that, we can go here on the visual part and see how this is actually working. A few of the cool things that we have in this visual testing feature set is that you can also say, okay, our tests are, it can extract information from the Git configuration, right? So for example, you can say, I'm running tests for the main branch of my application, but there might be a situation where you want to start doing like some feature work and you start a new branch. for your application. So you go there, you work on it, you maybe change your tests, you adapt them to the change in the feature, and then you can run your test, and but that will not affect the baseline that you already have, which is pretty cool because you can do parallel work without affecting each person's work. So you can contribute to each other, you can make still comparisons, and then you can show how things work in this way. So in this case, this didn't work. So let me go back. Talking that worked because there were no changes, but I'm going to show you a build that was happening a moment ago. Um, Basically, it's a very similar flow where we have the products, we have the catalog on the iOS app, and then we can see visually, obviously, all the differences that happen after running the test again. Um, Again, we can approve them, accept them, or reject them if that's our case. To finalize this quick demo I'm sharing with you all, I want to show you some tests I was executing a moment ago for the web application we have with, I was using WebDriver for this. So in this case, I was running this test in 4 different browser and operating system combinations. I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back because this is not the one I was looking for. I was looking for this one. Yeah, so something that I wanted to show, if this is the one, no, let me, yeah, this is not the one. I'm sorry. So what I wanted to show you is that one thing that we check the differences is that we're able to see so different types of differences. One is like the content, so maybe if the text changes, if the value changes, but also we can show you differences in the how would you say it, in the DOM. So here it is. These are the ones I was looking for. So in this case, we have the possibility to show differences in the so we are going to take, when we take the screenshot of the application, we upload that, but we also take the DOM as it is. So we take the CSS, the HTML, the whole thing from the web application, and we make the comparison to show you that it might be a change actually in the way the site is being rendered or not. So this one, there was no difference. So here it is. That's what I was looking for. So in this case, for example, we're highlighting this change, and we can see that in the CSS styling of the page, there was a change on how the text was being aligned. That is super helpful because it can help you as a tester or as a developer or as a UX reviewer to understand where the difference comes from. One last thing I wanted to show you that I will show in the slide in a moment is that it's also possible to ignore regions if you want to. So maybe you're aware that some sections of the UI change often, and you don't really mind about the picture that is being shown here, so you can easily select an area that you want to ignore, and then you just put it there. So the next time that area of the website changes, it won't be taken into account. I want to make a pause here and go back to the slides. So this is the code. I will share in a moment the link where this code can be found. But I wanted to give you a quick view of how visual testing works instead of just showing slides the whole time. I was thinking while preparing this slide deck that some of you might have a question if you're not trying already our visual testing solution, because all of you as customers already have some allocation for checks as well. So I was remembering that in 2018, in one of the first SOSCON conferences in San Francisco back then, I made a presentation. I was not even at SOS there, so that was interesting. I made a talk about the three important or the cornerstones about UI testing. So functional testing, layout testing, and visual testing. And I was able to conclude that layout testing is not that relevant most of the time, but visual testing was super important. And I was able to compare open source tools versus paid tools. And even though I was commenting that visual testing open source tools are super valuable to do a proof of concept, in the long term, they're really hard to maintain because you don't have this workflow I was showing in a moment ago, like, like approving, ignoring areas, and doing things like that as a team. Like if you do that in an open source tool, then you have to somehow build that workflow on your own and maintain that infrastructure on your own. So I just wanted to make a quick parenthesis that if you want to, the link is there. I can also share it. We can also share it later. And you can check the talk from 2018, like basically telling you why using a solution like the one we have makes sense to embrace it. So just a quick recap from what we saw a moment ago. The typical workflow is that you run your test suite, the visual commands are executed as part of your test steps. We have the screenshots, we compare them, you review them, and then you just redo the cycle again. This is just a set of screenshots of what we were doing a moment ago. So we see the build that has to be reviewed, we go in there, we review it, we approve it, we accept it, and then we run this again. We see that there are differences. We go into the UI, we check the differences, and if they are looking good for us, then we approve them or we reject them, and then we move forward. One extra thing I wanted to share with you before starting to wrap up this part of the session, I wanted to share some advices and features that we have. So this is what we were talking a moment ago, the ignore regions. So ignoring regions, it's possible to do that through the UI, as you saw that a moment ago, but it's also possible to do that through code. So when you're actually writing the assertions to do the visual checks, and I just realized I never showed how to do a visual check in code. I will show that in a moment. You can either do it like passing the locator of an element, and then what will happen is that in our backend, we will see, okay, you want to ignore that element. So when the whole thing is being compared, we locate that element and then we actually ignore it as well. We do support full page screenshots, but my recommendation is that use that only if you really need to do that, because they tend to be a bit slower. I mean, you need to scroll to the whole page and then stitch the whole screenshots together. Some browsers already support full page screenshots. So in the long term, this will be more performance operation. But the thing of it is that sometimes when you're scrolling, there are some sticky elements on the website or on the mobile app. And then what happens there is that you need to hide them to actually take the proper screenshot. So as you can see on the lower part, there are different options you can have to customize how this full page screenshot is being taken. And yeah, actually, this is how you would do it on your code. You would say like either driver, source visual check, and then you pass the name of the test or the check that you want to save, and then you move forward. One cool thing that is still in beta, but I was checking it during the previous days, and I think it works well, is to have the possibility of manage your visual baseline. So this means that sometimes someone will approve a baseline and you want to understand the history of those approvals, like who made the change, who made the approval, and so on. and that way you can actually understand the evolution of how the website, the layout, and the visual representation of it has changed over the different workflows that you have had as a team. So you can see here on the right side, like someone uh, added this baseline, like in this given time, and somebody added this for the first time, and so on. A few things that have been added relatively recently is the option to integrate these checks in your pipeline. So one interesting thing is that um, when you are running, I mean, you run your tests in a pipeline. You don't run them in your laptop the whole time. So when you run them in something like GitHub Actions or Jenkins, then you actually need a way to know if there is a way to break the build if the visual comparison doesn't work. So that's how you can use the source visual CLI. And what you do there is that you create a build, or you can use one of the environment variables that the CI server is giving you as a build number. And then you can pass that before the whole check start. You can tell Source Labs, I'm going to run these tests and I want this visual build to be called XYZ and 1, 2, 3, for example. And then at the end of the whole workflow, you can call again the CLI and say, please tell me the status of this visual check. We will return you the information of how the visual check went. And based on that, on the after or the post step in your build, you can decide if you want to break that build or not. And one of the latest things we added was to let you use that CLI to do visual comparisons of PDFs. So this is a very common use case in testing. So you can do your regular functional testing, download the PDF, and then put them in a directory, and then run this CLI command to compare the PDFs that you need to compare. As promised, these are the different resources that you can use to get started. So we have all the examples there up to date in our GitHub org, visual examples, source labs. And somebody was asking about Storybook. We have the example there, and I was running that earlier today, and it went pretty well. And the whole information about how to use this product is there in visual testing in our docs. So to start wrapping up, something I wanted to share, this is from personal experience when I was doing testing more often than what I do today. And also based on conversations I had with different folks from the community when they were started to embrace visual testing, this was something interesting that I was able to learn. And it's, you know, one of the common mistakes we run into when we do visual testing is that we want to put checks everywhere. And this has two downsides. One is that we use the location of visual comparisons pretty fast. And the second one is that we get an overload of information. So it's much better to start small, like test the critical user flows, or the components first if you're focused on Storybook. Whenever possible, focus on region-specific snapshots. So one important thing is that if you maximize the browser to the resolution of the screen, most of the time you will get also the borders of the taskbar or the scroll bar. So it's much better. You will see the guidelines in our documentations to make the browser just a bit smaller than the screen resolution, and with that you will actually get the screenshot that is better suited for this type of comparison. And yeah, so as we now have the feature of being able to tie the visual checks to your CI/CD builds, then it's much better to keep them tied to it. And one key thing that I have mentioned since 2018, since I've been talking about this topic, is that visual testing is not a single person's work. It's not the tester's work. It's not just the developer's work. It's kind of a team workflow, and you should review those diffs as a team um, when they are happening, not after the fact. So please don't ignore them, because in the end, they won't add value if you don't work on them as a team. And yeah, this goes together with the approval of baselines when there is a change, like also as a team, like figure out if this is actually a change that you want to perform, if this is intended. Also understand what browsers you're using to make this screenshot, understand what devices you're using. There might be situations where you're, I don't know, running a test in iOS 17, and maybe it looks different in iOS 18. So be aware of those differences and stay up to date with different releases that are happening.